Um, is that visible? Very good, thanks. Okay, so what I wanted to do is essentially cover a topic, turning the plastic tide in Orkney. There are four main items I wanted to look at. Orkney's plastic problem, a blueprint for action, scaling the success, and turning the tide. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and give some context. So here we have a map of the UK. UK coastline contexts, we're about 31,000 kilometers on the edges. Scotland is about 18,500. The Scottish Islands are 7,800. Let's call it 25% of the UK coastline is actually Scottish Islands. On that map, you'll see that we have little orange dots. These represent OSPAR monitoring sites, and these are all sites that are used to monitor beach littering specifically. In the UK, we have 31 designated. In Scotland, we have 5 designated, but only 3 are active. And within the Scottish Islands, we actually have none. This is quite important. We'll come on to that. So let's try and get a head around the challenge of scale and gaps. So the first thing is, I mean, you'll recognize from my accent that I'm not Orcadian. Okay, I'm actually an African. I've been in the UK for 25 years now. I'm based up in Westry, and as a new islander, you're allowed to ask stupid questions because you don't know processes, you don't know all the people. The first stupid question I asked was, what do we do with all this rubbish on the beaches? And Jane Nelson of Greener Orkney suggested that we go and count it, which is exactly what we did. So this was in April 24. It's one of our beaches on the south western side of Westry. At that point, just after winter storms, we counted 7,800 items, and that was using the OSPAR protocol, which had been enhanced by Scottish Highlands Federation as well as Greener Orkney. So what actually happened was that at that point, in April 24, which was the first survey we had actually had in Westry. Prior to that, Marine Conservation Society and Scottish Highlands Federation had done a fair amount of other work. And this is a piece of work and a report that was generated by Vicky last together with the team across MCS from 22, 23. And really without going into too much detail here, I think that the important thing is to be able to differentiate between mainland and the islands. So if we look at mainland Scotland, the fishing component and the shipping component represents about 5%. In the islands, we actually have a significant difference, around about 47%, plus 12% being shipping. So it's a completely different composition. But there's something else there as well, and that is that if we look at the abundance, you'll find that the marine litter we have in the islands is double what we have in the mainland. Now, this was work that had been done predominantly by Scottish Islands Federation together with MCS. At that point, we hadn't had much out of the North Isles. In fact, in October 23, the first Orkney North Isles survey was actually done across in Pappy, but that's all that we had. So Greener Orkney managed to get funding from Marine Fund Scotland, and we went ahead with a project between September 24 and March this year. And the objective was essentially to look at 4 of the North Isles in Orkney. That's Westry, Sandy, Stronsay, North Ronaldsay. And we set about doing surveys to establish exactly what the position is with litter. So in total, we did 76 surveys. These are all 100 meter stretches. Our our beach topology is actually quite different from what you find in the Western Isles. And I think that Tom Stanton will actually discuss that in a bit more detail tomorrow, where you actually have short transects. But what we did was we had all of these surveys, we did a fair number of recce's, and then we've actually recorded everything on a Google map. We've kept photo records of all of the surveys, all of the recce work that we've done, and an interim report was actually generated in March this year. We'll actually conclude that report March next year. Okay, so just coming back to the differences, mainland versus islands. As I said a few minutes ago, the abundance or the compositions are quite a bit different. In the North Isles, I'm talking specifically the Orkney North Isles now, we're looking at about 53% of the beach litter being represented by fishing derived bits and pieces, 99% of which is plastic. Now, to some extent, this is what you would expect from islands where our history, our culture, and our economy has actually been driven by fishing to a large extent. But then what we did with the Greener Orkney enhancement was that we actually did everything we would normally do with the OSPAR measurements. We then did a check on mass. And this is where a bigger difference comes in. So what you find is that the fishing litter dominates the North Isles, and it's 89% by mass. So if we look at just those 4 isles there, this is Westry here, Pappy over here. We've got Stronsey down here. This is Sandy, and this is North Ronaldsay. So these 4 pies here, what they do is the size of each one of those pies represents the median mass collected per survey. So if we just draw back, don't look at too much of the detail, but if you look at the size, if we look at what we had in North Ronaldsay relative to Stronsey, you see that this small little island up here, in fact, has the largest of the problem. Let me move on. This is Mill Bay. I'm going to move back. This is Mill Bay in Stronsey. If you can see my cursor here, that is Mill Bay there. Okay. This photograph was lifted from Orkney.com a couple of weeks ago. It's been taken directly as it is. If you read, it's very, very difficult to read some of that. But Stronsey is famous for its stunning beaches, and this beautiful stretch of sand is no exception. Mill Bay, between 2011 and 2017, was the only OSPAR monitoring site that we had in the Scottish Isles. And it's found on the island's east coast. It actually has a sandbar that protects it from marine litter coming in. Being on the eastern side, you also find that all of the prevailing winds will generally push everything back out. So no wonder it's actually a fairly clean beach. Now, our problem with this is that the data that was used from that single OSPAR monitoring site has been used as representative not only the islands, but also the background litter conditions in Scottish waters. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. We're going to move on. So if we look at just all of the information that we'd gathered with Scottish Highlands Federation, Marine Conservation Society, the Greener Orkney project, we know that our litter profiles are different, double the abundance, predominantly plastics. But what has happened here is with the data that we have and the evidence that has actually gone to marine, the assessment, is that we've developed an evidence and a knowledge gap. And the evidence gap really comes down to a few other items. For example, source attribution, the origins of the non-identifiable plastics, and then, of course, the scale of end of life or accidentally lost and discarded fishing gear. But all of this has actually resulted in a policy gap. And the result of that, of course, is that because we're underrepresented in the Isles, we also believe that there's an infrastructure gap. So I'm going to move on, because at the end of this, we on the ground are actually the downstream recipients of all this material. So let's just look at what we've actually done with it. Now, this just collage of photographs represents typical work that we've done with volunteers doing work parties. Within the aquaculture, we've actually had Cook Scotland, who've actually provided us with bins. We've used bins in Westry, now in Stronsey, also in North Ronaldsay. And really what's happened is that this has allowed almost invisible hands to start coming out of the woodwork, so that you actually have these bins on the beaches. They're being filled quite regularly, emptied not as regularly as we would like. But the truth is that we're suddenly finding our beaches are clearing. This is not all over, of course, because this third set of shots here, this is actually taken up in North Ronaldsay. So North Ronaldsay, January last year, with the heavy storms that we had, there was a 6,600 litre buoy that washed ashore. It was on the edge of the airfield. It took 10 months before we could actually get access and remove, at that point, 2.5 cubic meters of polystyrene. The issue here, of course, is that storm debris is a constant problem with winter storms. The thing that we need to deal with here, of course, is having some sort of mechanism whereby we can get the material removed. So we've had some successes. When we looked at the Green Orkney project, we used drones. I'm going to skip through these fairly quickly, but all I can say is that the having access to drones actually allowed us to do a lot of recce work. So what you actually have is that you've got a lot of local knowledge, but you still have inaccessible areas. And really what that's allowed us to do is to actually make light of very, very difficult terrain in some cases. So this was in fact curb. Just to give you an example of what we would see from the air, 100 meters, you can actually see there's clearly something there. You come down to 12 meters, zoom in, it's a clearer picture. On the ground, it gives you an opportunity to do a closer inspection and essentially get materials ready for work parties. Now, this particular spot it's only about 800 meters from a road point, but the problem is that we did this work just after winter. Summer comes, and then you've actually got livestock in the fields. The fields are wet, and we weren't able to move this for a year. The truth is, if had we had a drone with an uplift capacity of, say, 100 kilograms, we would have done this job in about 2 hours, as opposed to the 30 man-hours that it took us in May this year to deal with. But the drones have actually allowed us to actually find quite a lot more. This is a case up in Sandy. We knew there was one particular geo that had a whole lot of material inside it. We needed to make some sort of assessment, but using a drone and getting there, we actually covered a stretch of beach which not even dog walkers cover. This was about 400 meters worth of a pipe from aquaculture. We reported that to Cook as well as Salmon Scotland, and it was dealt with in almost a heartbeat. So let's just talk very briefly about some of the other community activities that we're tapping into as well. So up in Shetland they have Devorrelap. In Orkney we have Bag the Bruck. I must tell you, this is almost hallowed ground. Okay. It's an institution in Orkney. Every single April, the communities get involved. I think that the impact that Bag the Bruck has had through the years is actually substantial. It's well embedded now, but in all honesty, we're facing some serious volunteer fatigue. This is what we did with In the Same Boat in 2025 this year and the previous year. Now, this is a group of Norwegian volunteers, very, very similar to a group of volunteers called Scottish Coastal Cleanup, who operate in the western side. They've actually certainly done a fair amount of work with Sky. But really, what we've done in our part of the world is we've actually used these young guys who've come through. The first time they did it, they came through for 5 days, and in 5 days they lifted 3.5 tons. This year they spent 3 weeks. So what we did was we scaled up their activities, and they actually worked in 3 of the 4 islands we'd aimed at. What we're doing is we're going to bring them back again next year if we can convince them. The point is that these guys, in association with community, it really allows us to make significant impacts on some of those heavy hotspots that we have and the inaccessible areas as well. So just talking about some of the local lessons, there's quite a lot on the screen. I'm sorry, I do apologize for the small fonts. But just going back, what we did in Westry, in particular, Westry in the North Isles, including Sandy, we had 11 named storms in 23-24. We were able to lift 7.5 tons. That was over a relatively short period. This year, we only had 2 named storms. And the group was actually, as I said, with us for 3 weeks. And we managed to lift 2.5 tons. Now, across in the west, in the Western Isles, so Sky and the Small Isles, there was a recycling project that took place in May. This once again, this is just demonstrable impacts that relatively small groups are able to do. And at the end of this, everyone tends to get patted on the back for a job well done. But at the end of it, there's still unanswered questions. And from an island point of view, our biggest question really is, what do we do about disposal? So that's the first issue that we have. We're able to clear beaches. What do we do about disposal? And then at the end of it, how do we move towards a circular economy? I think that there are other downstream questions that we have to answer as well. It's the end of life fishing gear. It's the accidentally lost and discarded fishing gear, etc., etc., etc. The thing is that the work that we do on the ground allows us to build evidence which potentially allows us to actually influence policy upstream. Okay, so those are the local lessons. I guess that the biggest lesson I learned when we did the Greener Orkney Marine Fund Scotland project was improving beach cleanliness. As the more cleans you do, the cleaner it gets. Now, it just sounds so obvious, okay? That's what we do in our offices, in our kitchens. We keep things clean, we constantly clean them, and it stays clean. But the thing is, on beaches, if you allow your legacy material or your recirculating materials to hang around, you never, ever, ever get a clean slate. And the result is that you don't actually have sufficient evidence to influence local behavior if, for example, you had a lot of fresh fishing material coming in, for example, net clippings or what we call fisherman's kisses, etc., etc., etc. So the point here is that our beaches need steady cleaning, and every single season is different. So the winter storms will bring different storm debris. If we respond to these instances quickly enough, we at least have an opportunity for getting the really, really bad stuff out of the environment. So let me move on. We've actually had a fair amount of success, particularly with this collaboration up in the North Isles, in the same boat with Greener Orkney, with Orkney Islands Council. But there's really an opportunity to scale this up. And so I'm trying to not include any words in this, okay? And I just need to try and give this some sort of explanation, because we don't know all of the answers. I certainly don't, okay? But it gives us at least some sort of use of iconography to try and find proper answers. So on the left here, we have annual storms. We don't know what they're going to do every year. We've got dirty beaches, and we know we've got the evidence. We know that. What we ultimately want is we want cleaner beaches. To get there, if we have the community-led beach cleaning, relatively light cleans, steady cleans every April, every spring, in association with the heavy work parties, this is the heavy lifts, the big geos, the big storm debris. What that does together with, and in our instance, We're actually relying on Greener Orkney and its influence, and Orkney Islands Council and its influence and wherewithal to actually fill some of the gap here. None of this happens automatically, of course. So on the top left here, this requires an enabling team, and it needs people to be speaking to one another. Now, the unanswered items are clearly disposal. What do we do with that? The next thing is circularity. How do we deal with that? And I think that the thing that really strikes me is on the bottom left here. It's this question of surveys, of building evidence. And the analogy that I have to draw on is really if we were to take, for example, Plymouth, down on the edge of Cornwall, Devon, with a population of 250,000 people, about 10,000 beach walkers who make use of Dartmoor and the beaches. Those beaches, by the way, are generally quite clean. If there were heavy sewage discharges or other new instances, if there was a call went out for surveyors to step in and assist, there would be an easy answer. The truth up in the islands is if we take a small island like North Ronaldsay as an example, where we have significant abundance, we have a population of 60 people, about 12 people are responsible for everything, and that is the airport, the running the shop, the post, the ambulance, and we're going to ask them to assist with surveys. Unfortunately, you're not going to get much support. And so this is where the difference comes in. Plymouth, where there's 250,000 people and 20 kilometers worth of coastline, which is fairly tame, versus North Ronaldsay with potentially one person who can assist with surveys on 20 kilometers of coastline. Once again, how do we actually get that done? Now, we've actually had some success in the last 2 years up in Orkney's North Isles. The truth is we now need to scale it up. And so this is the first thing I would like you guys to actually remember. It's sometimes I tend to make things, simple things are fairly overcomplicated. What I would like to do is just to reduce this. If you can please remember DSRS, do it, scale it, repeat it. And if you build capacity, you can actually sustain it as well. And that's essentially what we're trying to do with the work that we've done in Orkney's North Isles, as well as the Western Isles across in Skye and beyond. There's an opportunity for us to actually do it, scale it, repeat it, and sustain it. So let's talk about turning the tide. The second lesson I learned was really about capacity. And if you remember, I had the four North Isles and the pies showing the median of the mass of material that was being collected per survey. I think that we've got Westry here, we've got Sandy here, population 600 on each island. Pretty much the same capacity, pretty much the same sort of problem. Although I do think that, and the evidence shows it, that Westry on the western side has a greater problem than typically Sandy does. But if we take Stronsay, we know that Stronsay doesn't have a problem. They've got an amazing community there as well. So if there is any beach litter, it gets dealt with almost instantaneously. So their bag the bruck or their seasonal exercises and any surveys that they do, they're not going to yield huge amounts. Up in North Ronaldsay, we actually have, as I said, 20 kilometers, 60 people, no capacity. These are some of these guys are superhumans. There's, I'm going to move on to the next one. Earlier on, I showed one of the surveys, the aerial shots that we had. This is actually a field shelter, not far from where we picked up that 6,600 liter buoy. And we knew that it had a fair amount of material in it. So what actually happened was that this last year, we actually had in the same boat guys go and do a mega cleanup, and that's exactly what they did. So in order to get a lot of this plastic out of the environment, they actually used this field shelter. That's 330 kilograms worth of material. It was gathered in about 4 hours. But the problem now is that how do we get it out of the field shelter into some sort of place where it's out of the wind, but accessible for removal. And then what actually happened was that the local farmer said, "No, you can't move that. It's not yours to move." Okay, but it's actually it's beach litter. You know, this is, if you leave it here and it's yours, then you're essentially fly tipping. So what do we do about it? And you know, so we had a bit of a Mexican standoff because we've got the stuff we had to get rid of, and the guy was not interested in us budging at all. So this is the second acronym I'd like you to remember: PMTD. People make the difference, and that's exactly what it took. So I'm going to come back to this little piece of plastic here because every piece of plastic tells a story, and this is actually a tuna tag. And so this tuna tag, in November 22, it was actually attached to a tuna, Canadian waters. And what it did was, the way that this thing works, it gets attached. It has a specific lifespan, and it's able to track location, measure temperature, and depth. And so what actually happens is that at a point in its life, the tag will detach. It'll detach, go up to the surface, and there's a small aerial on top of it. What that does is it transmits data back to home base. So what happened was that we picked this thing up on a survey in Cobest in May this year, and what we did was we managed to get a phone number on it and an email address, and I've got in touch with a mate across in the School of Marine Sciences in Maine University, and he almost fell off his chair because firstly, they never ever get these things back, and the second thing is this particular one, it was actually showing data that this particular tuna went completely off-piste, and they didn't understand why it went up to Greenland. But he said, "You know what? If you get this back to me, then what we'll do is we'll smash it. But we'll recover the rest of the data." And so that's exactly what happened. We returned it to him. They managed to get the rest of the data, and this is the picture that it painted. So this particular tuna didn't go off piste. He actually drifted across. He eventually got caught or died or whatever. But the point is that this plastic has a story to tell. It landed up in Westry. It grew wings. We sent it back, and it's told a bigger story. But beyond that, if you notice on that tag, on that photograph, it says a reward, and the reward was $500. So what we did was we took the $500 and we created a tuna tag fund for the people in North Ronaldsay. And we actually said, okay, Helen and Billy and Chris, here's 200 quid, solve that problem. And Mr. S, I can't mention his name, he's no longer fly tipping, but the material is gone. So all I really wanted to do was to use this as an example of every piece of plastic telling a story. But we, as people, we get to choose or create the ending of the story. So that leads me on to my conclusion. How should we change this plastic tide? I've asked you to try and remember two things: do it, scale it, repeat, sustain, and people make the difference. Now, we don't know all the answers, but there was that little set of icons that I'd thrown out there, which really entails answering some really, really key questions about how we solve this upstream problem and how the downstream solutions can actually inform that. So that's about it from me. So what I'd like to do is say thank you, and I'm going to stop sharing and hand back to Fiona.
Wonderful, John. Thank you so much. There was a lot to take in that presentation from the scientific point of view and from the people's story there. But really, I'd like to open the floor to questions. If anybody has any, they can either just raise their hand or pop a question in the chat function.
What I can do, Fiona, is actually make this presentation available. I'll do that afterwards, okay?
Thank you. Katie, would you like to come in?
Yes. Okay, I thank you so much. I really liked the presentation. I'd love to look back over the slides. That's so fascinating. I have quite a lot of questions, but the first one is, who empties the bins on the beaches? You said that you got them from, it's not some in Scotland, was it Cooks?
Yeah,
Who
no,
empties them?
Katie, we actually did use Cook. So Cook provided them in Westbury, and then what they've done is they've actually gone and provided them in Stronsay and North Ron as well. But your question is about who cleans them, and that's actually a problem. Okay, so at the moment, what in fact happened this last bag the buck in Westbury in particular was we worked exclusively with Cook. And that's not because OIC aren't happy to actually do the job. They are very, very happy to do the job. But it's just that because of island logistics, they're on hand. And in our case, Cook have actually helped. But I think that the question really remains for some of the other islands. And I think that the real issue here is that, every single island is unique. And I guess that's one of the other things that has really, really come out. Whilst there's a lot of sort of common problems and shared learning, every single island actually has unique challenges. And I think that even applies to the archipelagos as well. So if we start looking at Orkney Road to Shetland or Orkney Road to the Western Isles, and some of the Western Isles are very, very different, across that geography as well. So to come back to the question about what we do about the rubbish, it remains a challenge. So this coming year up in Orkney, between Greener Orkney and OIC, there's a really, really strong collaborative effort on the go. Planning will kick off in January, but the real problem here is that OIC do not have funding for beach litter. And I think that is one of the issues that's come out as a result of the knowledge gaps, the policy gap, and the resultant infrastructural gap as well. So it's a long answer to a short question, but it's not easy.
And John, are you finding that with the information that's now coming through, that you are getting, that there is more awareness about what the gaps are, and I guess a political level or a strategic level that?
Yeah, Fiona, I think that to answer that's a difficult question to answer as well. But I must say that there's a lot of momentum that has developed. Between Scottish Highlands Federation and Marine Conservation Society is a very, very strong advocacy body. And I think that what we're able to demonstrate is not only the ability to be a conduit for island voices, but I think that what we've done with respect to marine litter within Scottish Highlands Federation is we've got a model that can be used for delivering marine litter solutions. So I think that there's a lot more shouting that has to be done. And in a lot of cases, it's not actually shouting either. Some of this, if we look at the end-of-life fishing gear, the 2.5 tons that we pulled off Westbury in May this year, within 4 days, another 7.5 tons were put on top of that. That's end-of-life fishing gear. 3 weeks later, another 20 cubic meters were placed on top of that. And all of that has actually been dealt with responsibly by the aquaculture guys. But it's all happening because that's the nature of their business. And what we would like to do behind closed doors is actually have conversations whereby we can maybe just get some of these waste streams to merge and just make it a bit easier for the islands. So, Fiona, to come back to your question, there's a lot more to be done on the advocacy side, because I think that the problem that we have at the moment is the Scottish Marine Assessment 2020, as well as the OSPAR quality survey results, QSR. They're still suggesting that Orkney's and Scottish waters are sitting at 40 pieces per 100 meters. And that's not true. We know that's not true. But we've got to get that evidence up the ladder.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Lauren, you have your hand up. Are you happy to come in and ask the question?
Hello. Sorry, I just wanted to ask, as someone who's based on Orkney, outside the beach cleans, what are ways we can get involved and help?
Well, I think. Sorry, Lauren, are you in the Isles? Are you in
Yes,
Orkney?
yeah, I'm on mainland.
Oh, are you? Okay, great. Yeah, then what you need to do, you need to get in touch. The email address is greenorkney@gmail.com. Okay, please drop an email. We're, as I said, there's a volunteer fatigue is a big issue. Okay, and there's important work to be done. So, yeah, we'd be very keen to hear from you.
Perfect. So greenorkney@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you heaps. I will do.
Okay.
Katie, you just put something in the chat there. Did you? Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I did. I can say it again. I was just thinking back to your first slide, and I think did you say 7,800 pieces of plastic in a 100-meter stretch? Was that it?
Yeah.
How many people got involved to do that survey, and how long did it take?
Okay, that particular survey was only 2 of us. Okay,
Wow.
that was only 2 of us. But what actually happened was when we got to the job of cleaning that up, that was 17 people in all. That was on the Saturday. We spent 4 days actually clearing that, but we brought a farmer in. He had some heavy lifting kit, and the job was done. And I've got to tell you, Katie, that if we go back to that beach now, the plastics have actually come back in. But the last survey we did in August this year, we picked up 500 items. Okay, but that only weighed 13 kilograms. Okay, so I think that really it comes back to that earlier point that I made, where you actually have successive beach cleans. If you keep it up, it's like keeping your desk or your kitchen tidy. It stays tidy. It stays manageable as well. So to answer the question, at peak we used 17 people. It took us 4 days. We did 3.5 tons from that particular beach. Okay.
Wow. Thanks.
Okay.
Brilliant. Does anyone have any other questions or comments at all to make? No, well, I guess on behalf of everyone, John, not only thank you for presenting today, but thank you for all your continued energies and efforts throughout the islands and the information that you're sharing across other areas. As we said, we really wanted to start the conversation to bring some of the learning and understanding the challenges across Highlands and Islands and how we share that across the region. As you say, each community is unique, each island is unique, each beach is unique. So it's really important that we're sharing information, and I'm sure that lots of people will take away from today. Fiona, did you have a question there?
Just an administrative point that we forgot to stop the recording during questions, but that part won't be shared, so to worry.
Yeah. No problem. That was me. I got carried away. I was excited to hear the answers to John's questions. So yes, the answers and questions and answers will be
Okay.
will be included in the recording today. Yeah. So
Cool.
really. Yeah, John, just a huge thank you, and thank you
Okay.
for sharing your contact details. Exciting that you might have a new volunteer. No pressure, Lauren, at all, but that would be a great outcome of today. Yeah, so tomorrow we are back online at 1 o'clock with Dr. Tom Stanton from Loughborough University, talking about the research he's been involved with, a lot of the projects across the islands. So looking forward to hearing some more data and processes as well from the outcomes of his research. So if you haven't already, please do sign up for that. But really, everyone, enjoy the rest of your lunchtime, and thank you again, John. Thank you.